What's up everyone? Welcome back to the channel. Today's video, we'll be taking a look at this Grizzly 8-inch joiner. So this video will be an unboxing, a brief assembly. I'll give you a couple reasons as to why I selected this joiner, and also you'll see me make my first cuts on a joiner with it. So before we get started, it is worth noting as a disclaimer, I am not sponsored by Grizzly or anyone else. I selected this product based off of my own research and purchased it with my own money for my shop. So enough talk, let's get into the action. So the first thing that I needed to do was to get the boxes from my truck bed onto the ground. Now I picked this up from a freight company about an hour away from where I live. So I got two boxes. One has the joiner stand and then the actual joiner bed and wings in the other box. So this first box was the stand. I opened it upside down, of course. So I gracefully removed the box, and all the foam that was in it was packed up very nice. And then to ensure that the mobile base was indeed a mobile base, I did what any grown man would do, which was obviously riding it across my shop floor like a horse, which confirmed that the mobile base was indeed mobile. After I was finished with that, it was time to try to move this box out of my truck bed. It was very heavy, and the only way that I could do this was to put a rope underneath it and pull it. So here's a look at the box made out of plywood. Just wanted to give you an idea of how Grizzly ships their items, or at least this item. So I began by prying the box apart with a screwdriver and a hammer, and then I climbed up to see a look inside for the first time. Here's how the joiner bed lays, so you obviously can see that you wouldn't want to stand this up on the side, and the box on the outside did have several warning signs not to do that. So I'm glad that I opened it up rather than trying to tip it on its side. I felt like it would be easier to tear the box apart rather than try to lift the joiner out, so this was the perfect excuse to hit something with a hammer. You can definitely count me in anytime I get the opportunity to tear something apart intentionally, and this was no exception. So the box broke apart pretty easily, and then I actually thought that I would be able to pick the joiner bed up and just carry it off. That's actually pretty funny looking at it back now. This joiner bed weighs over 350 pounds, so there was absolutely no way that I was able to lift this by myself. So in the next part of the video, you'll see me use the weight bench to tilt this out and drop it out of my truck bed. As a disclaimer, I just want to say don't attempt this by yourself or under any circumstances to do it the way that I did it. This thing is extremely heavy, and if you were to drop it on the ground, you would risk either injuring yourself or you could also damage the joiner. So use help, use common sense, and don't try to do this the way that I did. With the joiner section in place, I moved it out of the way, but you can see here how easy it is to move with the mobile base. And then I was finally able to take the protective plastic off. One thing I was impressed with Grizzly, and you'll see more of this here in a second, but with these packages as well as the joiner itself, everything was packaged up very nicely. It all had protective wrapping. Here's a look at the dust collection shroud, which came with the hardware, the belt, which was in the box as well. And then I opened up all these packages, so like I mentioned, packaged up very nicely. This is the blade guard, which goes over the knives, which we'll look at more here in a minute. It appeared to be made out of some thick aluminum or some thin metal. The joiner comes with two wheel handles to crank the beds up and down, and then you also get some push blocks. All of the hardware is included. All of the wrenches to tighten the hardware is included. Here's a look at the wheels to adjust the beds. They are solid metal, very sturdy, very heavy duty. And then here is the pair of the push blocks that you get. Now these are nothing special, just your ordinary push blocks, but thank you to Grizzly for supplying these. I already have a set of these, but it's nice to know that Grizzly knows that you should be using these with a joiner, and the fact that they included them rather than trying to save a couple bucks is awesome, and I think that makes a great statement from their company. Here's the electric connection with the safety switch and the plug that this joiner has. We'll look more at that here in a minute. And then here is the back gate that goes on the back of the joiner. So as far as assembly goes, the first thing that we needed to do was to secure the bed tables to the mobile base. You get 3 of these bolt things, and then they simply go from the top of the mobile base into the joiner beds. So there's 3 of these, 2 on the inside, and you can see here I was able to put them in just by hand, and then they can be tightened up with a wrench. So the wrench that's required is supplied by Grizzly, so there's no need to worry about not having that one wrench that you always can't find whenever you need to tighten these up. After those 2 were in place, we moved over to the side where there is 1 more bolt to put in the top. So if you're not seasick yet from that frame, you can see here that there is 1 last piece that goes in the side. And then after this was tightened up as well, the joiner was secure in place. You can see here I'm lifting on each side, and it is very secure. There is no wobble at all. The next thing that we needed to do after the joiner beds were secured in place was to put the belt on. So this orange belt guard comes off first, and then on the motor it is mounted in with 4 screws. These will need loosened first. Again, the wrench that is required to use on these bolts is supplied by Grizzly, so no need to chase down a wrench. Then the belt can simply go on. You'll want to put the belt on the top section first. And then because we loosened the screws on the motor earlier, the motor can slide upward, the belt can be put on, and then the motor can be pushed downward, which will actually tension the belt. So you want to hold a little bit of downward pressure and then retighten those screws, which will hold the motor in place and keep the belt tight with where it is supposed to go. After the belt is on, the belt guard can be put back in place, so you just pop it back where it goes, and then there's one little screw attachment that goes on that. The door that goes on the back has this little swivel bolt, so no hardware is needed. You just put it in place and then turn the knob, keeps it nice and secure. To attach the post with the on-off switch and the power cord, there are 2 bolts that go through the holes on the bottom of this, and then they can just be put in place, and then they're tightened up with a hex key. I think that this hex key was supplied by Grizzly, but I have a set of these, so I'm not sure if I actually grabbed mine or I just used the one that came with it. So now we're under the joiner wings, and we're going to attach the wheels for raising and lowering the joiner beds. There's electric tape over the threads to keep them from getting scuffed up or beat up. The wheels simply pop in, and then there's a screw that goes in the center that'll hold the wheels on place. So there's 2 wheels, one goes under each bed, and then these can be independently raised or lowered, which we'll look at later. Attaching the dust collector shroud is very easy. You hold it in place, and then there are 4 screws that you bolt in on the side. That's all there is to it there. And then finally, I could take the last remaining plastic off of the actual joiner head itself. Everything was coated with some type of oil-based coating to keep it from rusting, so I just wiped that off with a paper towel. There's probably some certain type of cleaner, but I just used a paper towel, which worked fine. Now, zooming in on a little bit of detail, there were a couple rough spots. I don't really care too much about this because I'm going to use this joiner a lot. And then to put the blade or knife guard on is very simple. You unscrew the bolt and then it simply slides into place. Now it does have a spring mechanism action. We'll look at that here in a second, but there's one screw that goes underneath to keep that in place. To adjust the wings, all you have to do is loosen these safety bolts, and then you can use the wheel on each side to raise or lower. So you can see that the bed slides down or up, and they both are adjustable, so they work on both sides. Here's a look at the top, so you can see that the bed goes down and then back up as I turn the wheel in the direction. As I mentioned, there's a spring mechanism in the guard, so as you push the board through like this, it will push the guard outward, and then as the board comes back in, it will spring back in towards the fence, keeping your fingers safe. The electrical connections is as simple as plugging them together. Now here's a look at the cord that comes on the Grizzly joiner. For reference, here's the other plug on my saw stop, so you can see that they are a little bit different, but this joiner is 220 volts, so make sure that you do have the right electrical outlet hooked up. Next, I hooked up my dust collection adapter, and at this point I'll be quiet for a minute so you can hear the joiner. You saw me just run across the joiner. This is the first time that I've used the joiner, and to be completely honest with you, I am shocked by how good of an edge that this has. Obviously, I thought it would be pretty good, but this is what I would call either perfect or very, very close to perfect. Now, I really haven't even taken the time to set up and dial this joiner in exactly, but I can already tell that the edge on this is so much better than anything that I had gotten with the table saw or the track saw. And just from that first cut, I think that the joiner has already justified itself. And I know that this will give me such better results and way more accuracy when cutting the edges on boards. So I ran this on both sides across the joiner. Now I'll rip it in half, and I'm going to put the seams together just to show you how perfect this edge is. Here's a quick look at the squareness. Now this isn't face jointed, so it's obviously not flat on the side, but you can see on the top that the surface really is perfect. So this is how the board was before I cut it. I ripped it right here. So here's the new seam. This cut is where the table saw blade was, which means that this is where the joiner seam was. So this board isn't perfectly flat. There's a little wobble, so take that into account. But first, look at the table saw side. So this is actually a pretty good cut still, and this would glue up nicely. This would definitely work. But now look at the side where the joiner was. So there's literally no separation at all. You can't even see where the seam is other than because of the grain pattern, but this is absolutely perfect. Another difference that I don't know if the camera will pick it up, but the board on the right is from the table saw. You can see a little bit of the cut marks. The board on the left is from the joiner, which again, no cut marks. This is pretty well absolutely perfect. So a couple reasons as to why I bought this joiner. The main reason that I bought this was to speed up the milling process and to get a perfect edge on the sides for glue ups. In my previous videos, you've seen me use my track saw for this a lot. That works fine, and that does give good results. The problem with that is that that takes a lot of time to set up. So this joiner should give me an even better finish, and it should go a lot quicker and a lot more efficient than using my track saw. Now this joiner is kind of one of those purchases that I've been putting off for a long time. Now one of the contributing factors to that was when I bought my SawStop table saw a couple months ago. So just like this, that was one of those purchases that I had put off for so long. When I got that saw, I was actually mind blown by how awesome of a tool that was and how much more efficient I was with the building process of having that saw. So while this joiner was definitely a big purchase, I'm hoping that it'll be able to justify itself by helping me make better pieces and be a lot more efficient when building. So if you made it this far in the video, as always, thanks for watching. I appreciate your support. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to like, share, and subscribe. Give me a thumbs up. Leave a comment. Let me know what you thought of this video or this selection of the joiner. If you stick around on my channel, definitely watch for me to use this in a lot of my upcoming videos. Once again, thanks for watching, and as always, stay tuned for more.